Most Americans understand that the media isn't what it used to be. And well, you probably do. And that's why you're watching this show. Most of you don't trust the news. And I don't blame you. The corporate media hacks on the left have completely infiltrated the majority of the media. And so you could literally see that everywhere. There's a new Rasmussen Reports poll out that reflects the lack of trust the American people have right now with the media. And well, 61% of likely US voters believe the problem of bias in the news media is only getting worse. And I'd have to agree with that, honestly. That is a very, very true claim. Now, 9% think the problem is getting better. That's a very, very low number, of course. Now, interesting enough, folks, we talk about it here all the time on the show. I tell you, don't trust what you see in the corporate media. Ask the most basic questions before you believe it. Joining me to discuss all this is Mark Mitchell. Mark Mitchell is the head poster over at Rasmussen Reports. Mark, thank you for joining me. I'm very excited to have you on. I also wanted to tell our audience you do have a great YouTube page that they could head over to. That link is in the description of this video, where you lay out all of these great polls at length. And so people could dive into the data with you there. Mark, this new poll, though, I got to say, I'm a big fan because, I'm always bashing the media since I come from that world. And 61% is a very, very big number. What do you make of all of this?
Well, two things. That's actually the biggest number we've seen. So these are record setters. We've asked this question a couple of times, and the numbers have been bad. But here, like 61 to 9% bias is getting worse, not better. People hate the media. I think the second most important thing to point out, though, is that almost all of this data was done before the debate. So it's
Wow.
like the media is so quickly beclowning itself that we have to go right back into the field and try and like rerun these numbers. But there was a lot of interesting and also really good news in this poll. And believe it or not, it isn't just a conservative phenomenon. Pretty much everybody thinks bias is getting worse. Democrats, it was 45% worse to 14% better. That's the lowest, but still not great. Republicans, 71% worse to 9% better. Independents, 67% worse to 4% better. Now, we talked about this before. I think we're going to see even worse numbers because that debate, I think, rung a couple people's bells. Going into the debate, America told us by 10 points that they thought that Donald Trump would win the debate. Now, people knew about Joe Biden's mental issues. A strong majority of people told us they thought he had some form of dementia. But after the debate, Trump had a 35-point win, which means that 25% of the electorate, like millions of people, expected Joe Biden to do better than he was. And then they witnessed the last week of the media, just this utter circular firing squad as they're destroying the Democrat Party, pointing fingers, trying to get Joe Biden to, it's just crazy. So like this cycle is moving fast. I guess maybe these numbers aren't as fresh as they could be, but they're already record setters. People are, I think, waking up to the
Yeah.
fact that media bias is really bad.
Yeah, and I mean, it is really bad. I mean, I've spoken openly about what those editorial meetings were like for me, and even in the so-called conservative media outlets, you still have a lot of left-leaning people in those rooms, and they do swindle the coverage a certain way rather than just being down the middle like how it should be. Even in local news is the worst too, but we can't even dive into all of that. I want to go to a second question that was asked, and it's more so of a quote to see if who agrees with it. This one, no matter how much you hate the media, it's not enough. 45% of voters agree with that statement, 28% disagreed, 12% of those who strongly disagreed with that statement, and 27% are not sure. What do you make of that? Because the numbers aren't as startling as they were in the first poll number that we just read.
Well,
Data.
it is. It's a higher bar. This was a bit of an experimental. I mean, we've heard this phrase. I think you probably heard it
Mhm.
too. It was kind of a struggle to actually find somebody to attribute the quote to. We talked to our friend Chris Nolte. We talked to Julie Kelly. I mean, like everybody expresses this concept, and every time we hear something like that, we want to think, well, like what does America say to this? And here, like a plurality of America, at least somewhat agrees that you have to hate the media more than it's already hated, right?
Mhm.
But only what is that? 28% disagree. So it is 45% to 28%. Like that's not great numbers for the media. And what was kind of interesting here too is that it looked like somewhat bipartisan. The number for Democrats was 42%, 50% for Republicans, 43% of independents. So like everybody hates the media. Now, if you like bigger numbers, like, but wait, there's more. We have all kinds of ways that we've proved that the media is horrible. And the one, like we've done this in the past, the numbers are huge. This is from just, 3 months ago, which again is in a pre-debate America, right?
Mm-hmm.
But still, do you agree or disagree with this statement? The media are truly the enemy of the people, and we all know that. I think was that a Roger Stone quote? Well, 60% of U.S. likely voters agree with that statement. Only 36% disagree. I mean, it's almost 2 to 1. 2 to 1.
Yeah.
30% strongly disagree. Only 21% of America strongly disagrees with that statement. 79% of Republicans and 60% of independents and even 41% of Democrats think media is the enemy of the people. So it's like,
Pretty impressive.
and now they did the Biden cover up, right? So
Yeah.
numbers can go south.
I think that speaks for itself. I mean, there's only so much you could like deny at this point, right? We actually yesterday on the show we're talking about how the media, and on Monday too, the media is not trying to cover up for lying to the American people this entire time. And I think most people with the functioning brain and two eyes saw right through all of this. But they sat there. Remember when they were using those terms like cheap fake because the White House said it, and so they all echoed it on from the New York Times to CNN, MSNBC, and the American people are now like, wait a minute, hold on. 2 weeks ago, you were just telling us that these were cheap fake videos of the president not being able to walk and not being able to speak. And now it's actually a legitimate concern for so many. And they're all trying to backpedal out of it as if they weren't sitting there pushing the same lie from the White House. There was an Axios reporter who was like, oh, they fooled me too. I've been in the White House for over 3.5 years, and they
Yeah,
told me all
right.
these lies about his health. Yeah, you don't ask questions. That's literally your only job. So it's interesting.
I think the whiplash is what surprised me most because I watched the debate. Everybody, in the political circle did, and actually, 88% of America watched at least some of the debate. That's incredible. So they saw Biden with their own eyes. Really bad for the Biden camp. But that night of honesty we all got, I think we've reached peak gaslighting. You talked about the cheap fakes, and everything I saw on Twitter about that was, well, this is like out of Animal Farm George Orwell stuff, right? Like the part, like 1984. And really, I think what we saw Thursday night after that debate was a moment of clarity where the press said, oh, finally we can stop lying about this guy. There's no way they're going to want us to cover up that performance. And then the very next morning, what did they do? They're back to covering up their performance. But I have a little bit of good news. One of the questions we ran in the set is which one of the following news organizations do you trust the most? And some of the biggest liars here, CNN and MSNBC, only 10% of America says MSNBC, only 12% says CNN. So that's only 22% of American electorate is getting their news from dedicated Democrat propaganda outlets. Then the networks, if you add the networks up, it's less than 19%. A lot of people, none of them beats everybody except for Fox News, and Fox News and Newsmax is 34%. That's pretty solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although we like independent media here, right?
No, yeah, well, I'm not bitter. I did my whole tour anyway. But no, I mean, it's interesting in itself because I think that's really important to drive home. Their ratings were horrible. We always joke, but CNN, you only saw it really when you were at the airports. But now that they've yanked it out of the airports, most people aren't watching, and you've seen their ratings crash. I think the biggest thing that could save them right now is Joe Biden actually not getting reelected and that President Trump goes back into the White House, because then that gives us something to talk about. That's when they pretend to do real journalism and they go out there and they attack the president every single day. And so that seems to key in really well with their voters. They had better ratings when President Trump was in the White House than they do now. And so I think they actually need him more than he needs them. And so I think that's a key point too. Mark, before you go though, I wanted to talk to you about another poll that you just released. It's Joe Biden's approval numbers for today. This is thanks to Miranda Devine, who sponsored this poll. It looks like Biden's numbers as of today are 44%. It's his approval rating. That seems significantly high because, he could barely put together a sentence, and that makes me concerned that there's many people who approve of him. What's your takeaway from this?
Yeah, we get this sentiment a lot. And I think people need to have a gut check and understand the size of the political divide in this country. First, I would say we're the only pollster that actually is in the field every day polling on Biden approval. And we do not fudge our numbers. We ask
Mhm.
people questions, process it, report the results. We don't do what other pollsters do, where they do this like monthly mega poll and it's really highly manicured. So people can come and look at our numbers and see the numbers swing. And I'll tell you, Joe Biden's job approval rating was lower. It was like 40% going into the conviction. And he got a bounce out of that. Independents were happy. They went from a 32% approval rating up to like 42%. And the Democrats loved it. They went from 67% to 78%. And believe it or not, the Democrats were not phased by that debate. His job approval rating is still 78% among Democrats. Now, you could call it a pity bounce, you could call it circling the wagons. One thing I can tell you, though, is that debate horrified independents. Independents went from the low 40s back down to the low 30s, but we have Biden at a 44% approve, 55% disapprove, 11 points underwater. Our latest matchup, 2024 matchup coming out, looks like it's going to be, a 4 to 6 point race now. And like, what makes more sense to you in a 4 to 6 point race, that one of the candidates is down 11 points, or that he's down like 30 points that some other pollster has him at? And that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you take a Bloomberg and they got Biden up one, and then they have his approval rating at like 37 or something. Like, that does not make sense. It's not internally consistent. A lot of people watch corporate mainstream Democrat propaganda media.
Mhm.
A lot of people have their head in the sand, and a lot of people still think Joe Biden is the elder statesman, the best that DC has to offer. This is the best president ever. And like, that's a reality. Like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, his approval rating is not 30%. It's worse than Trump was 4 years ago, but it is
Yeah.
not that low.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, like you say, it depends who you ask, depends where you live in the country. We kind of we've seen it through the media. Everyone gets like kind of a different look at it. I have family members who I'll bring up things about President Joe Biden, and I'll say things like, "Oh, did you see that he fell here?" And they've never seen any of those videos. Number one, because they're not
Yeah.
playing it on any of these corporate outlets, but also the algorithm on social media will make sure that people like my family members who are left leaning don't see it. And so it's interesting how we live in one country, but it feels kind of like two separate countries, because you could debate somebody on politics and their argument is completely different than yours, and you just can't understand why, but it's because they see two different realities. And I
Yeah.
guess that's the world we
Yeah.
live
Well, I think it's the media is the enemy of the people, right? I think
in.
like that's fundamentally our problem here. I think there's things that Trump supporters, conservatives, probably have no idea is a thing or is going on. Like this whole thing about Trump and the splotches on his hand or his forward head lean or whatever, all these things, right? Like it's a totally different world over there.
Yeah.
But like as your viewers probably know, we're objective thinking, rational humans that are trying to arrive at the truth. And we need more of those kind of people in America.
Absolutely, we do. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us again, folks. I wanted to direct you to his YouTube page. That's where you guys could go to look at all these polls at depth. Mark walks you through them, so definitely give that a look. Mark, we'll see you again here soon. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
My pleasure.